Thanks, Hannah, Deputy State Engineer with ADA.
It's Catherine Skinner, Pima County Transportation.
Pastor Tano, PM County Transportation.
Ramath Peg.
Isa Rodriguez Peg. Jeanette Durham Peg.
David Linda Peg. Sam Credio, City of Tucson, and we will go to the folks we have online. Let's see here. I'll start with Dana. You there, Dana?
Dan Grossman, Town of Marana.
Thank you. Robin.
Robin Rain, City of Tucson.
Thank you, Robin. And then if we can switch to the others, there's only one I saw. Can't see the panelist tab. Josue.
Josue Lisa, City of South Tucson.
Thanks, Josue. Heidi.
Eddie Lasham, Town of Marana.
Thanks, Heidi. Mark.
Good morning, Mark Hoffman, ADOT Planning.
Thanks, Mark. The other Dan Gabao.
Hi, Dan Gabbio, Federal Highways.
Yeah, I'll get that name right one of these days. Galavale.
Morning, this is Nalo with Town of Sarita.
Mike. Mike Iswalt.
Hi, yes, this is Mike Iswalt from Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else online I didn't call them? All right, before we move off introductions, I do want to take chair's privilege here and just acknowledge that this is Mark's last TPC meeting. I was notified today that Mark has been a longtime member at TPC and has been with the University of Arizona for 30 years. And you're retiring. This is your last TPC meeting, correct?
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you, on behalf of all of us in the region for your service. And, glad you were able to join us for your last meeting in person. Thank you.
I'm ready to represent the university in this committee. So thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. With that, we'll move on to item 2, in-kind reporting. Jeanette Brent.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by reporting time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for the grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. The sign-in sheet has been circulated, so make sure you sign it before you leave. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. With that, we will move on to item 3, the approval of the April 17th, 2024 meeting summary. Have you all had a chance to review? Do you have any questions or comments before I ask for a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I have some comments.
Go for it.
So I'm assuming that the topics that were related to the contract, contracts are going to be, that information is going to be fed up to the regional council since that was their request to have it at TPC. So I think it's really important that all of the main points that were made at that meeting regarding those contracts be noted in the minutes. And I think many points were actually missed. So I'd like to try to get those included before we approve them. I'll speak for myself. I think there were a number of things that I said that were not included as well as others. And the things that I would like to have included in there are that the projects do not align with the CRP guidance, that those projects do not reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation system, and that the funding does not align with the guidance at all, and that the consultation coordination with underserved communities as well as the jurisdictions did not happen before those went up the chain to the regional council. And so I would like those points to be clearly included into the minutes so that the regional council is aware of my particular viewpoint, at least.
Thank you for those comments, Natalie. Was that under the,
Show photo.
ortho photo item, the first one we discussed
Mhm.
regarding CRP? Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I have a
Catherine?
question,
Yep.
and a comment. So under item 4, which is the review of the and recommend approval of the draft, fiscal year 25 through 29 tip. One quick typo in my spelling of my first name in the second paragraph, if we could correct that. And then, definitely captured the action better in this, so I appreciate that. I noticed that the legal action report originally had an incorrect action captured, and it's been since corrected, so I'd like to better understand that process and how and why that part was changed. And then I would also just say, one thing that was not emphasized in this, and I think emphasis could be added, is that at this level, we will never be able to fully program RTA projects. So that is at other levels.
You want that noted as part of the,
So not in the action, but as part of the discussion.
okay. You asked a question in there about the legal action report.
Yes, so when I originally checked it in advance of the management committee, it had a different action than what is shown in the meeting summary. It's since been updated on the website, but I don't understand how there was a change in that and how this committee could have been notified of that or should have been notified of that.
Ag staff.
Yeah, the legal action report is just a document that we put together after the meeting, so if there's a comment on it, we'll go back and change it. I believe that's what happened. There was a comment submitted and we revised it, so.
Okay. Yeah, I never got a response to that email, so that was really my curiosity. It's when it had been changed, if it was my email, if it was a discussion at management committee, like it just seems a bit of a disconnect in that communication chain.
Okay. Does that answer your question? All right. Thanks, Karen. Any other?
Sure. Catherine, can you go back and you mentioned something about with this RTA, this tip won't be able to program RTA projects? I didn't quite
We
capture.
will not ever be able to fully fund them at this committee level.
That's part of the comments.
That's part of the comment. It's stated, that only the RTA board has that authority, which is true, but I think it's important, and that's what was communicated during the action, is that we can never do that. It's important that they understand that is a job for somebody else. So they're not looking for our committee to do that. And if they want advice, this is me talking now, they would need to ask for it.
Okay. So kind of following up on that, we have a couple comments on the meeting summary. How do those get noted and posted after they're approved at this committee?
They'll just be revised and then posted.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Great. Any other comments or questions? Anyone online? All right, so we have some additions and comments that need to be added to the meeting summary. With that being said, do I hear a motion with those changes to approve the meeting summary?
I'll move to approve.
All right. Jose gave me a nod. So all right, we have a motion to approve the meeting summary with the noted changes. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, seconded by Natalie. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 4. This is actually picking up where we left off last time before we had our technical difficulties. And this is the briefing and discussion on the dial-a-ride and micro transit service area to be given by Preston McLaughlin. Wasn't sure if you're going to go back over the presentation or just kind of a recap and then pick up where we left off.
Yeah, I was just going to provide a brief recap. I wasn't going to represent, just go over the slides, very high level, kind of what was discussed last meeting, and then just open up the floor for any additional questions that the committee may have.
Great.
If that's all right. But yes, yeah, I'm here to discuss and just continue the conversation for the dial-a-ride microtransit service area analysis. So at the last meeting, I just provided just a background reasoning for the project. I provided an overview of the key differences between what a dial-a-ride service is versus a micro transit service. highlighted some of the key elements to this project. And then provided just a rough, or not a rough, but a general timeline for when this project will be completed. And yeah, so we can proceed with any additional questions that the committee may have.
Great, thanks, Preston. And I was reviewing the meeting summary to kind of refresh my memory on where the conversation took us last time. Last time I had asked what the total contract was. You said it was 900,000 is the cost for this total contract?
I believe, yes, it's 900,000 with the stipulation that 250,000 of that funding is coming from a separate FTA grant.
Okay.
So and that will be used for the Vail and Picture Rocks transit feasibility study that's part of this project.
So since that time and today, I was able to we're actually preparing an item on our comprehensive operational analysis that we did in conjunction with PAG. And that entire study was less than 600,000. That was a very comprehensive study looking at the operations of Suntran, Sunlink, Sun Express, and Sun Shuttle. So I'm just curious, why is this contract so much?
It's a good question. I'll probably have to defer to either Hannah or someone from Kinley Horn or someone else to maybe just discuss a little bit in more depth, details on the financials.
Okay. Hannah, Kinley Horn? I think the scope was in the material, right? Okay.
Yeah, I can, this is Mike Iswell from Kinley Horn. I'm not sure if Hannah's in the room, if she wants to talk first about this, but I can provide a little bit of clarity on the scope and the different items in there which contribute to that cost.
Thanks, Mike. Take it away.
Okay. So our scope has a number of different tasks in there. So as Preston had said, the 750 of this is doing a countywide microtransit dial ride analysis. And so this is a pretty comprehensive look at scanning basically the entire county, looking for, it starts off with a pretty comprehensive mobility needs assessment. So this is trying to help us identify what those opportunity zones are. So this is a pretty intensive kind of data analysis using a whole variety of different sources, demographic data, model data. We get data from some different big data sources. So there's a pretty big lift up front to really identify where microtransit need is the greatest, and then trying to identify what those different zones are. So this is taking this kind of broad countywide, looking for those populations that could benefit from these types of services. There's then a pretty significant outreach aspect to this. So we want to make sure that there is sufficient outreach to underserved communities. A lot of public outreach meetings are scheduled as part of this. So that's one of the other kind of major cost components here. We are proposing as part of this kind of 2 rounds of meetings. Each one of those has approximately 6 public workshops. And this is each of these workshops at these different phases is the first phase is really to inform the community of how microtransit works, its benefits, and how some possible scenarios for how it could be deployed. Then the second round is then really trying to then solicit community feedback on very specific, there'll be proposals where we can show here are the different opportunity zones and different service areas. And we then want to then use that second phase of outreach to then solicit that community feedback on those. So each of those outreach elements has a significant cost element to it. And then there's a fair amount of modeling that then comes off the back end of that, which is then understanding what the capital and operating costs are for each of these different areas, and then a significant piece of sort of planning and implementation for those services. And we're looking at doing this kind of comprehensive microtransit plan, and then there's some specific assessments of some of the existing dial-a-ride services that RTA operates. And this includes also some additional public outreach. There's some Title VI analysis, some safety assessments, also as well as looking at some how all of these services integrate with other local transit services. So there's lots of different elements to these, to really each of these components in the scope, and combined with those outreach elements, that's what drives that budget.
Great, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that overview. Other questions and comments for the staff, for the team here? But yeah, right.
So when I think about dial-a-ride, if I understand it correctly, that somebody makes a phone call to get a ride, and then a bus or a car has to go to a house, pick somebody up, take them to their destination, and then do that every time with every person that dials a ride. Is that correct?
Partially. The actual main purpose of Dial Ride is to consolidate trips. So to get multiple people going to the same location, to pick them all up. That's similar to carpooling. So I look at it and think of it more like carpooling, which will reduce single occupancy vehicle trips in the long run by that consolidation.
And so that would happen every time that it would be consolidated. What if somebody needs a ride to a place that another person isn't going?
It would happen every time, but the goal is to plan and coordinate those trips in a way in which you can provide multiple people with the same type of trip. And so, yeah, I can't guarantee that would happen every time, but it would happen more often than people just taking their vehicles every time.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Are you anticipating setting targets for the trip reduction impacts you would want to see as a part of the revised Dial-a-Ride service?
Yeah, and I know that there's a component, I think it's in the scope of work, looking at the ways in which if we were to implement these new microtransit service areas, how that would pull a certain number of those vehicle trips off the road. And so there will be analysis of how this will impact those types of single occupancy trips and how that will decrease those trips with the implementation of these new service areas and existing service areas.
Yet I would expect that one of your other goals would be to increase trips in your service. Is that safe to assume?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to increase ridership, and again, by hopefully consolidating those trips and to have those, smaller vehicles, preferably hybrid vehicles or even fully electric vehicles that we're looking into, provide those trips as well, and to consolidate to use it more as a carpooling type of service.
Thanks for letting me interject there. No problem. You have follow-up?
Yeah, I just, I do find it hard to believe that it would result in reduced BMT. Are you planning on doing air quality analysis to see how much carbon will be reduced from the transportation system if this is implemented?
Yes, and so if you look at in the scope of work for task 1, page 1, it breaks out kind of the key breakouts and performance metrics that will be studied, and there is an environmental breakout, and so that's going to look at VMT, greenhouse gas emissions, and how by implementing these services that will reduce VMT, greenhouse gas emissions. So that is part of this project, scope of work.
Preston, so that we complete this study, and I imagine there's going to be a set of recommendations. How do you all see those recommendations then being implemented?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the last task is recommendations to PAG and to all jurisdictions, stakeholders in the region, how they'll look. I mean, I'm hoping, again, we're looking for increased efficiency for our existing services. We're looking to find targeted areas where this is an appropriate transit service, where maybe a fixed route bus service isn't applicable. So we're going to highlight those areas for recommendation. Again, looking at ways in which we can improve our trip booking, making it more kind of tech savvy, increasing the technology aspect where riders can book through their mobile app or online through an app versus calling in. So there will be those recommendations of how to make it more efficient and more rider friendly as well. Those are my initial thoughts, at least on that.
Okay. Will those recommendations come back to TPC?
They should, yes.
Right.
I believe there's, I forgot. Yeah, task 1.3 in the scope of work, there's going to be a technical working group that will consist of both PAG RTA staff and local jurisdictions to provide input and guidance throughout the process of this project.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So before I close the item, just as a reminder, the regional council is looking for input from us on these items. I should have said that at the beginning. I think Natalie did a good job during the meeting summary, making sure that we capture that in the meeting summary. So this would be a good time, just if you have any other comments in terms of the impact these CRP funds will have on the region, to make those comments now on this particular project. I'll go first. I think that $900,000 is a lot of money to spend on this study. I think I said this last time, that there is a lot of value in us as a region better understanding how to utilize microtransit. There's no debate there. When I look at the amount of effort that we did on our COA, our collective COA as a region, compared to this, I'm just concerned about the cost. And I'll leave my comments at that. Any others before we close the item?
I have a question, kind of piggybacking on that in terms of the cost of this element. It's not lost on me that somehow this contract is exactly the dollar amount that was in the OWP, which generally is challenging when you do a budget to get it to the penny. So I'm curious if the Kimley Horn proposal is truly to that amount, or are we recommending just using the full amount in the OWP, even if the effort we're discussing is going to cost less?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I will probably have to defer to someone who's more versed in the finances.
Yeah. All right, thank you for the question. So the OWP amount was $750,000. And just to clarify, for the microtransit dial ride analysis itself, it's $700,000, and then it's $200,000 from the ADOT award to equal $900,000. If that helps.
Okay, so there's $50,000 from this agreement, and then there's been others authorized in previous meetings by regional council. There's the ortho photo extraction from last time. Do we have an accounting of how much of the money is above the actual contract amounts to these vendors that maybe is available for other CRP initiatives?
And that I may have to, as far as just keeping track of the excess amounts.
Correct. Okay. Because I think one of the challenges and frustrations is, we're down to the wire in terms of getting these authorized this fiscal year, it sounds like. But there was not a comprehensive process that could have begun a year or more ago to discuss what the most effective ways to use this funding could have been. And so I'm trying to identify, are there funds actually available that maybe we could, as a group and using public input, figure out how we would prefer the remaining funds to be spent?
And for that, I might have to refer to Jeanette.
Did you have a response?
Just in general, the OWP sort of represents the funding cap. And we also have to take into account that there could be change orders or something that would affect what is in those contracts. But if there are unused funds, we typically would look to see how we can carry those funds forward. Or we wanted to see, as we're analyzing our federal ledger, if there's an opportunity to release those funds as part of all projects.
Okay, I would recommend, I guess, that there is a clear accounting moving forward at our meetings of these CRP funds, or, maybe that report should go to regional council, but it seems like there's the potential that there, $500,000 that won't be spent. And I think we need to ensure that every dollar we can get to carbon reducing activities is put to that effort, since the plans are just plans if there's not implementation.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess, as you recall, the OWP is a contractual arrangement between PAG and ADA. And so the funds that are identified for the projects are essentially encumbered to those projects. So to go in and see if there's any savings from those projects would then require an OWP amendment, and then probably some action from regional council related to that, and then contemplation of whether the same process would be followed to put those funds into other activities within the work program or to release them through a call for projects. So I guess I wouldn't hold my breath because it's already contractually obligated and encumbered onto the activities in the work. But it's a good question and one worth asking.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Catherine. Anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just.
Go ahead, Jose.
The overall work program, who's responsible for that? I know there's a lot of programs in the overall work program, but who's typically responsible for bringing contracts to the regional council? Is that us or is that? I mean,
Amy,
it's a little bit, it's,
answer that. I don't know the answer.
because a lot of these programs have been in place for many, many years. And they just said, okay, this year we got so much money and most of the years it's the same amount. Like for mapping or also traffic volumes on, but every year it's almost the same, but we never get involved in that stuff. Why we want to see this program? At least that I recall it or remember.
Well, I
Asking the
mean,
region, we want this, we want to see this in the overall work program. They just comes to us as this the overall work program that's in between PAG and ADA. That's the regional, I was asking the question, like, well, who?
Well, we
This is, we want to see this in the overall work program.
So I don't know who makes the decision. I'll let the staff answer. We discussed this last year when the overall work program was being updated. We did submit, well, the city submitted written comments. I think maybe others might have, but we actually didn't get an opportunity to comment because that is, I understand it, outside our scope as a committee. And I'll let the staff build on that.
I think what I've seen traditionally is that the management committee, the regional council have the authority. Usually the management committee gets a chance to review and provide comments like we did last cycle. And it's always council that has the decision making authority for the overall work program, which covers not just transportation activities, planning programs and planning activities across our organization.
So at the end of the day, it's the regional council who can, that answers your question.
That sounds about right, because
Correct.
I've been doing this for many years. I never been in a situation where, well, we want to see this in the overall work program.
well, and Jose, to add to that, I think that's the unique challenge we face here is CRP funds have never been really a part of the work program. This is new and unique money that's coming that was programmed without comprehensive discussion at committee levels or from the public to understand how we could put it to best use in our community. And I think that is the frustration that a lot of us feel.
And I would add to that, that the CRP funds are not exclusive for PAG use or MPO use. And having done a quick look around what other MPOs are doing around the country, the vast majority have released a call for projects to align with the program purpose of CRP for projects to reduce transportation emissions. So I think that's where the real thorn in the side comes. There's probably PAG projects that would rise to the top in such a call for projects, but there probably are other projects that have not even been put on the table at all because the question was never asked.
SMAG, what are they doing? Are they doing something similar, studies, or they're using that money for projects?
From what I've seen, MAG is, I believe, putting half of it toward an evaluation study of using zero emission buses, battery electric and hydrogen, and the other half going into their regional transportation electrification plan. So I'm not sure per se if that equates to a call for projects. There might be availability and putting it toward the transportation electrification plan for perhaps jurisdictions to install chargers or whatnot. But those are the two avenues I believe they went with their CRP funds. And
maybe
they receive, I think, over 50 million for their area. Yeah.
And maybe not a traditional call for projects, but it was a committee vetted decision. Essentially, the committees had that discussion and decided these are good uses for this funding so that we can get closer to understanding zero emission transit vehicles and charging station approach so that we can then roll out from there.
Yeah, I'm not sure their full process. I saw that the those proposals for funding were put before, I believe, their equivalent of like their management committee for approval.
Great. Thank you, Dustin. All right, any other questions? We do have one more CRP item to discuss. This won't be our last chance to discuss CRP, but any other questions for Hannah? All right, thank you very much. Hearing none, we will move on to item 5, a briefing and discussion on the household travel study and assessment by Unemi Zhang.
Hi, I'm Yumi Zhao, Transportation Data Science Coordinator. I'm going to talk about household travel study and assessment project. And here are the contents of today's presentation, background and overview, project task and deliverables, and project timeline. COVID pandemic and technological advancements impact on daily travel behavior, VMT, energy consumption, and greenhouse gas emissions. COVID-19 changed daily travel behavior, especially for trip frequencies and mode choice. After the pandemic, a significant number of individuals continue to work remotely, and it resulted in less commute and business trips and more non-commute travels. Also, during the pandemic period, public transportation was the least preferred to promote because of safety concerns. But after the pandemic is over, it is reasonable to expect changes in travel mode preferences, potentially going back to the choice made prior to the pandemic. Also, daily travel behavior has been influenced by technological advancement. Recently, we can see more purchases and uses of e-scooter, e-bike, and electric vehicles. Ride-hailing services, Lyft and Uber are very common nowadays and not a new transportation service anymore, but considering travel mode options available in 2009, it is a very new transportation service. The COVID pandemic impacted on e-commerce, and it is still going on in post-pandemic era. More people use e-commerce instead of going to retail stores, which means less VMT for daily shopping. However, it has been quite a while to collect household travel behavior input regions since 2009, which is 15 years ago, and was participated in National Household Travel Survey, NHTS, as on in 2008 and 2009. At the time, the travel patterns of 2,300 20 household samples were collected, and it is a current background data for calibrating and validating current travel demand model. To conduct an accurate model that better informs planning, we need up-to-date data. And here is the overview of 2024 Household Travel Study and Assessment Project. A household travel survey will be conducted to collect 4,200 household samples, and it is approximately 1% of the total number of households in Peck region. Also, travel patterns of 820 passengers and college students will be collected in addition to 4,200 samples, because these groups of population could be easily undersampled. We will apply an oversampling strategy to this group. Finally, 24-hour travel diaries will be recorded by income group, age group, household size, and etc. Also, air quality impact analysis would evaluate how these changes in travel behavior influence air quality. As I mentioned, there has been quite many changes in mobility patterns, including VMT changes, travel mode shift, parallel participation, and trip frequency changes since 2009. We can assess which factor is the most influential one on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to it, we can also show greenhouse gas emission by socioeconomic characteristics or trip purpose. For example, the analysis on greenhouse gas emission by gender, income group, education level, and etc. Also, we can compare greenhouse gas emission by trip purpose, greenhouse gas emission by commute versus greenhouse gas emission by discretionary activities such as shopping or leisure activities. And then what will be the next step? As for the next step, first we can update input data of travel and air quality model to get more accurate model result for the transportation improvement program TIP and regional mobility and accessibility plan RMAP. And next, findings and strategies obtained from air quality analysis could be incorporated into long-range transportation plan RMAP. Also, air quality conformity. And I summarize the importance and benefits of PEC household travel study and assessment project below. So this effort is consistent with the approved FHWA dot and regional council planning activities to incorporate IIJA mandated carbon reduction emphasis into PEC's long-range transportation planning to serve the entire region. The household travel study collects the latest and most accurate data for use in refining our transportation planning process. And PEC's expert team of data scientists will use this data to enhance air quality modeling and establish a more precise baseline of mobility patterns in our region. We will be using the development of PEC's regional mobility and accessibility plan to establish baseline information for use in meeting carbon reduction planning federal requirement. And I will talk about the project task and deliverables shortly. At a kickoff meeting, project measurement plan, work plan, and data QA/QC plan will be discussed with ETC Institute. Project measurement plan focused on communication protocols, roles and responsibilities, and data privacy and data protection procedures. Work plan is about the timeline and scope of work of each task and data QA/QCs to assure data quality of the collected travel patterns. Secondly, existing supplementary data will be reviewed and evaluated to integrate them into the data collection efforts. For example, combining street-like data and household travel survey could improve coverage and representativeness of data collection efforts. And to do that, survey materials, including questionnaire sampling and respondent materials, will be reviewed and discussed with ETC Institute. Third is ETC Institute and the PEC team will work closely to design survey instrument, data collection method, sampling method, and a sampling plan. Fourth, pilot tasks will be performed to set up incentive amounts for recruitment and to develop orientation guides for all call center. And fifth, the ETC Institute will recruit households and conduct a household travel survey. Next, the data collection result will be reviewed and analyzed, and the survey result will be reviewed by the PEC peers before finalizing it. Finally, a final report and final data set will be provided. And here we can see the project timeline. It will be a 14-month project, and project will start in June, and it will be wrapped up in July of 2025 if this project would be approved by Regional Council in May. And PEC did a solicitation bid process to choose a consulting company, and ETC Institute partnered with WSP was selected, and ETC Institute will conduct a household travel survey, and WSP will perform travel behavior and air quality impact analysis. And this is all I prepared, and I'm happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Open it up to questions. Ellie?
I have several. Thank you. Why has it been 15 years since you've done this household travel survey?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Johansino, data science administrator, and taking care of this, most of this, the CRP project and the data science team is actually currently working on. For Because of its budget issue, it's not just a small budget and more likely like a $1 million is kind of just required to just cover and volatility and showing like a representative of samples of a region level. It's a 1% sample as a 4,000, little over 4,000 household. Each household, we actually just estimate around just $250 versus $300. So it's actually very and a high number, but usually recommended 10 years and they're supposed to have actually our just the survey, but the situation not allowed and also just COVID-19 happened. So it's kind of just delayed and waiting and a little while.
Okay, so based on what you're saying, it hasn't been done because the funds weren't available and now they're available with this funding stream. And so you're taking advantage of that to implement this. Okay. I don't know how many of you are aware, but PAG does implement a travel reduction program whereby it is required for employers to survey annually their employees if they have more than 100 employees at that employer. You collect a significant amount of data annually through the travel reduction program survey. Why would that survey not be used to do an analysis about telecommuting habits since it's specifically for workers?
So telecommute analysis we've been conducting and we're actually sharing through just the TRP and task force meeting but this is actually the TRP is only highlighting and the commute and the not highlighting just the other behaviors. So it does not show us and any different just the income level and it doesn't show up just the full picture of just the population. So that was the kind of just the reason we need to have just the household travel survey.
Okay, I would argue that the employers are the ones are the important ones for the telecommuting. People aren't telecommuting to the grocery store and other places, so it's particularly important for the employer. So I do think that is a very appropriate data to use for that analysis.
TRP data is very important and especially the survey, but the problem is actually just as you mentioned, 100 plus employers and more likely just we have a lot of like just a small business employees as well. So that's not covered at all. So there was a kind of just a difference and the behaviors, their departure time is different and the data manages the different aspects. So we'd like to just highlight this study.
Okay. What was the justice story analysis that was done to ensure that this money that's being spent is going to benefit 40% of low-income communities in Pima County?
So right now, this is the actual just the fundamental data. We never just we had earlier, but the sample size is the 2008 and 9. But right now, we don't have just the new information. It's the income group and especially for low income and also just the area and disadvantage the area and based on the IIJA or J40, the map. So we'd like to kind of just highlight their behavior patterns as well. And we also like to just improve our just the modeling and in terms of just their behavior changes and hoping to just help through just the RMAP process.
Okay, well, the money that's being spent with the carbon reduction program funds, there was supposed to be an analysis that was done before decisions were made about how the money is spent, about how that money will actually, the projects or plans will benefit low-income communities. That doesn't seem to have been done.
The IIJ is a very recent one, and I think just we're currently just reviewing our just performance measures, and but more likely just what you are seeing is just I think we have like just a plan, but data collection is the first one, and try to just understand their behavior because after COVID-19 just changed, and then just we think just there should be some just application or implementation. Regarding that.
Okay. I do have another specific air quality question. Would you mind going back to your overview slide? Yeah, the next one, yeah. So you listed their air quality impact analysis, and then you list VMT change, transportation mode shift, telework participation, and trip frequency change. I don't see an air quality analysis with an air quality model that would give us emissions data. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, the air quality data is actually just part of the next step, and this is the fundamental data. And but we actually want to just evaluate and their patterns, and based on just the data collected historically. Because of this is the important just the input of the model. Then just after some effort and in terms of just updating our model, that will just tell the impact and through just the moves model or just the other and the components.
So it would be when you're actually running the model for things like conformity, or, I mean, you're not doing an emissions analysis specifically for this particular project.
Impact analysis will include just a rough idea, more likely just a greenhouse gas emission inventory update, something like that. But it's not actually likely just the moves model and the supposed to be used. But we try to just understand main focus is about just the data behavior and how much it changes and what would be the impact. If needed, just so we can consider that just the model, but that's actually next step. That because of that just strategy development and also development of the baseline and the model.
Okay, so it does seem that there's not going to be an analysis for the funds that are being used for this particular project. It's only going to be an analysis that will be effective in the future when you're doing that analysis for other reasons.
But it's probably just how we were to change we're going to evaluate just 2024 and the year, and because of the telecommute changes, then what's the BMP actually reduction? So we can just roughly estimate just the air quality, just the improvement, but we are actually not planning to just utilize the model at this moment, but that's actually next step. So it's partially actually doable, not all the way you are looking for like through just the moves model.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want to state for the record that and I would like this to be in the record, that I do not support the use of CRP funds for this particular project, although I do, like I said last time, believe that this is important for transportation modeling purposes and ultimately other work that's done. I don't think it is the most appropriate use, and I don't believe that the FHWA guidance document on the process by which these funds should be spent was followed, and therefore I don't support it.
Thank you, Natalie, for those comments and that statement. Any other questions or comments?
So just a quick follow-up on that. So it sounds like the data you would get from the household travel survey will help you establish a new baseline model. And then that new baseline model would establish also new baseline air quality analysis. And then in the slides, you also have the connection and the input into the long-range plan RMAP. But my understanding is that the timing of that will not allow you to use the new data and the new baseline for the RMAP that's being developed currently. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And because of we are conducting just the RMAP, and but every just a 4 year, as you know, and we'd like to kind of just improve in our just the model, and based on the survey, then just the next RMAP and is the target and the time. We'd like to just use that information.
One quick follow-up. I'm wondering, and maybe this happens during the time when you're actually fashioning the survey, but how will you deal with seasonality issues of, the population change that will happen in this community between winter and summer? Is that just an assumption, or will that be integrated into the survey question to understand which of these types of groups that have these travel patterns and these travel patterns actually are only part-time residents? I'm just curious about that more than anything. So,
I think about the question because of the impact is always supposed to be maximized or just reduced and maximized and of the analysis. So through that, and we try to just collect and usually data and based on just the fall season or just the spring season, because of we have a relatively just high population. And there's no seasonal, and of course there's a seasonal impact, but students and you go to school and more just the activities are related and something like just the daily patterns. But the seasonal impact and is doable, but not this study. But usually just the week of panel study is collecting just set up the panel and collect the data, just the survey and the data. And all through the year, and the magazines are now just conducting in that survey.
So just to Natalie's point, it does seem, apparent that this is not something that will effectively reduce transportation emissions. I think it's important fundamental work for modeling in the region, but it doesn't reduce those transportation emissions and doesn't really get us closer to projects that will reduce transportation emissions, which I think is kind of what the goals of the program are. I've been aware of this need for quite a while, having former time involved internally with PAG, so I recognize the need for this important work. So thank you.
Was it?
I'm just curious about the 4,200 household sample. How do you determine who you're gonna choose the 4,200 samples that's gonna represent the 1 million individuals in the region?
Yeah, so the PET collects not only just the modern data and the PET data science team is also doing and the population projection, employment projection. There's just the PopTech and members. So regarding that, we also just to collect the building permit data and from our jurisdictions. And so those data actually includes in the housing unit and also collecting and census data, and which also shows the how many inventories that we have, and just also just estimating just the number of households. So this is more likely 420,000 households in the region we have.
Great, thank you.
I don't have it in front of me, but I do recall when I originally reviewed this contract that you all were, or the contractor was proposing a random sample, not a representative sample, and those are two different methodologies you can take when you do public surveys. So why was a random sample rather than a representative sample methodology chosen?
I don't know about just the representative sample, and which might be just the target in the area or just a certain in the population group. But our model in the impact is actually region. We'd like to just replicate exact the population and the income group, the age group. So through that, we have to just select and randomly. And because of we didn't know, and the selected sample, targeted sample, doesn't actually show the representativeness of the sample. So we'd like to just have the random sampling and to show the regional representativeness.
Okay, that would be another reason why I wouldn't agree with this, because PDQ actually conducts a phone survey every year, and we are targeting only 500 people. However, we ensure that it's a representative sample by ensuring that certain zip codes are being reached, as well as certain demographic components are being reached. So that's how you would get a representative sample. I don't know if there's somebody here from the firm that intends to do this work, but I don't think that a random sample is a good way of going about doing. I think we need to have a representative sample to ensure, especially those low-income communities and minority communities are representative.
No, I think it's just the random sampling is actually just nationally just utilized from just the major in the survey companies, and that's actually just mostly just prepared in the samples and the sampling collection method. And the representative, I'm not sure just what you're saying, but we have just the income group, like just a low income, middle income, high income. We need to show that just the population group and the regional is available in the number of the population categorized in the low income. We need to just have those in the income group and also just a low income group. And we need to know about just the genders and the ages, and need to show all the just representativeness of that specific just a group. If you are talking about that, that's actually just a representative sample, but we do in the sampling randomly, but they're showing the representativeness.
I do have a question. So as this project moves forward, I suspect you'll report out at some point. Will this come back to TPC at some point for input? Okay.
I have kind of some big picture, not specifically on this, though I do think it's important to note that this is a need that PAG had on the books predating when there was carbon reduction funding. And so the selection of it seems like an opportunity rather than an intentional choice to fit the funding that exists. Like if there had been more STP funding, that would have been more appropriate, or an increase in planning funding. But we had a very specific type of funding that it was just a great opportunity to fund this. And I don't know that that's the best use of the money. But big picture, can you all remind me, what is the total amount of CRP funding that we expect to get in PAG region?
I've identified that as $11.5 million through the life of the IIJA. Based on what PAG has shared and what's been released by the federal government.
I think you're right. I think I heard like 11 mil.
Okay, and so how much at this point has been encumbered or obligated both through the OWP and through contracts?
I see Jamie looking through, looking for the answer. Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
And I'm reviewing an amendment that was shared last October. That includes the CRP funded projects from the 24 and 25. And I'm looking for a total. David, do you have something?
I know that in the current OWP, there's $6.3 million shown. So to me, that would mean there's over 5 million left that has not been obligated. I think it is important, and I would recommend that this be in the minutes, that when the next OWP is developed or whatever methodology is used to select projects for carbon reduction program, it goes through a fulsome effort of input, and projects are identified starting, so there's input from air quality and from EPAC and from this body before recommendations are made up, so that we avoid having these conversations again in 2 years. And I would add to that, that if there is funding remaining after these contracted activities are completed, that goes into that call for projects for future programming.
So I think those numbers are pretty close. I will remind you that there was the initial year of CRP was incorporated into the PAG work program through an administrative amendments. An initial portion of 2.3 million was put in there. And then some of that was spent on, I'm not sure what activities, eligible activities for CRP stuff. And then there was a carry forward number that makes up that 6.3 million that you're seeing in the current fiscal 24 and 25. So it's pretty darn close, but there's a little bit of differentiation.
And Catherine, just to clarify your statement there, you said, additional input, you're not talking about just TPC, but the other committees that also.
Yeah, the air quality committee, the EPAC, that it starts kind of more at the committees that maybe have more time to spend investigating the best use of these funds and can make recommendations up through the further committee structure.
Okay. Thank you. Jamie, did you have? That's how you calculate it out. So
confirming the total that this year, that 6.359321 of CRP revenues is included in the fiscal years 24 and 25 in the overall work program. David, did you want to add any details about the nuances of CRP and managing our budget?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TPC. Certainly across the IIJA, I agree with that 11.5 million figure and agree with Jamie's figure in the OWP. Some of this becomes a little bit complicated. For example, in 2022, when the IIJA first was enacted, we didn't really have any guidance on how to use CRP funds. So we worked with ADOT to delay kind of accepting some of that money and kicked it off to further years down the road. Other issues surround obligation authority. Although I have all these apportionments and fund sources, I have to strategically work to make sure that we use STDG, for example, to the fullest, and also our tag funds, which we just awarded, which means we have to use less of other stuff. So some of that other stuff that gets left on the table could be things like SPR, which would be planning funds that we could use as PAG, but we choose not to use to give more STBG and the like. CRP may be one of those other ones as we go forward in the next couple of years, when some of these small loans from ADOT from that 2022, 2023 time period kind of come back as well. So that accounting can get pretty complex. I don't want to go into great detail right now, just because I don't have a spreadsheet, don't have all the details at hand, but I agree with a lot of the discussion that has happened so far as kind of a baseline estimate.
If I may just add to that, thank you, David. So when the CRP funds became available, as you said, this is a new program. Yeah, we did coordinate with ADOT in terms of eligibility and making sure that the items that were considered were in fact eligible for the program. And this is while ADOT was developing its strategy. So ADOT did not even have a strategy in place from which we could refer to as part of our program. So this was all the initial phases. It really kind of informs why some of these projects are included in OWP. Now, how we go forward next year, next OWP cycle will be all different, but that's some of the background in terms of how this was done.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you for those questions. What I would just like to say, piggyback on what Catherine said, is that, at our committee level and also with EPAC, we are expected to be the technical experts and can provide that input and advice to the management committee and regional council. And so I would just hope that you lean on that expertise, and we're, here to work together to try to program these funds in the future. Any closing comments before we move on to the next item?
I've got some closing comments, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I think it may be imperative to request that the EPAC chair and the TPC chair be the ones to convey the summary of the discussion and recommendation that comes from those bodies. Because what we're seeing is a little bit of differentiation between both the background and how the projects were selected and put together. So while some of these projects appear to be important work, this is the first time these committees have been presented with any specifics about these projects. We haven't seen them before. It's the first time this committee's been asked to provide any input associated with the region CRP funding. This committee and others requested opportunities to discuss the best use of the region CRP several times, starting more than a year ago, and requested to be part of the process along with the public, which is a requirement in the CRP guidance, to identify eligible projects as required in the implementation guidance. Following the fourth request by TPC to be a discussion item on the TPC agenda, committees were then warned that they are, quote, not authorized to interfere with contractual matters or the administrative affairs of the organization, and that, quote, use of these funds, federal CRP funds, for other requested needs are not allowable. So we were told we can't even talk about it. We can't even look at projects that might be eligible and good fit for these dollars. Committees were then told by PAG that any such discussion would have to wait for ADOT to establish its CRP strategy document. While that effort was underway by ADOT, but well before its conclusion, PAG committees were then informed by PAG management through a memo dated April 6th, 2023, that, quote, the carbon reduction program has been added to the PAG fiscal year 24 and 25 overall work program. So that was done even though there was no direction or action by regional council for that to take place, which to me is a bit shocking. Instead of administering a process for the identification and selection of CRP projects that is, quote, designed to reduce transportation emissions as required in the guidance, projects for use of the region CRP funding were identified by PAG management from its ongoing OWP work activities with no input from PAG member agencies, the regional council, or the public. Opportunity for meaningful input from PAG jurisdictions and the public was eliminated upon the declaration by PAG management that the region CRP funds were funds allocated to PAG activities prior to any action or direction from regional council. This declaration led to PAG bypassing any public input and the consultation process identified in the implementation guidance for the use of the funds, and regional council approving the incorporation of the region CRP funding into the work program. So it's difficult to provide feedback on these projects before us today and how they tie to the carbon reduction program, which was part of the motion from regional council, when the jurisdictions and the public have been prevented from providing input into the shaping of any plan to address the region's new CRP funding. All requests to be part of the input and consultation process for determining the best use of the region's CRP funding were denied. What we can say is that the activities identified by PAG management for the use of the CRP funds that have come to the region do not appear to meet the goals of the CRP guidance and the regulations to fund projects that are designed to reduce carbon emissions. They also do not appear to prepare for the prompt implementation of projects that do reduce carbon emissions. We understand that planning is an important piece, but planning for how to address carbon emissions, maybe that is a more appropriate goal in this manner. That does not seem to be one that's being met. This committee and the public expect its MPO to administer a process for new programs such as carbon reduction program that incorporates input from its technical committees, policy board, and the public in ways that identify the most beneficial uses of the funds to achieve the program goals, not find ways to utilize the funds for their own activities with no consultation from others. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. All right, hearing no, go ahead, Jamie.
If I may, Mr. Chair. So we've talked about these different CRP funded programs, but I feel like it would be helpful for staff to remind this committee of what the overall purpose of our CRP program is. And I'm looking at Dustin and Jeanette for help on this, but my understanding is that this assemblage of all these CRP funded projects is really about data collection and establishing a CRP program from which we can establish performance measures to better inform how we move forward with our CRP funding. So is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. Dustin, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's, as you stated, Jamie, there's as far as the consultant supported projects, we've already got 6 of those underway. Some of those have been presented to the committee, such as the AVM exploratory planning tool to plug in scenarios to evaluate the outcomes that are going to be most beneficial for carbon reductions. With the regional active transportation plan underway, it's all an effort. We're pushing into mode shift toward transit, active modes, reducing single occupancy vehicles. That's the target overall, is for less fuel consumption will result in less greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, there's several projects that have already been employed. That the dynamic traffic assignment model, was the reference the multimodal performance assessment as well. So these type of things are all looking together through the use of our CRP funds to be able to put together metrics. FHWA, it's paused now, but had the new greenhouse gas performance measure where we're going to need to be able to start quantifying reductions. This is all moving towards that planning process to select for projects that are going to shift, out of the single occupancy vehicle into the alternative modes. So,
Chair and staff, and I wonder, we've heard, I think, just from 1 or 2 jurisdictions. Are there any other jurisdictions that want to comment on PAG's overall approach to this in terms of the collection, establishing the program?
Anybody online?
I don't see any hands raised. To James' point, this is our opportunity to give feedback to the regional council. So this is your time.
Well, my position is that, doing attending these meetings for a while, and that's what PAG does, collect data. And what do we do with that data? That's the question. What do we do with that data? Collected, for example, we have this annual survey that's an travel reduction. And we have also, there's a lot of studies that are done annually. And basically what we do with these studies is try to implement projects. For example, how to reduce I'm trying to find the words in there because we've been doing so many projects, but and somehow we keep missing the goal. Like, for example, fatalities. You know, for, God, almost 20 years now, we've been in the LTA, we've been building road expansion, we've been transit. And somehow we keep missing the goal. Like, why are we increasing fatalities on our citizens? Maybe we've got to take a step back and look at, okay, what's going on here? I mean, we do a lot of road constructions, sidewalks, bike lanes. Or we're still missing something. Maybe we do need to do a study. And that study might guide us into the future, like, well, maybe we're doing this wrong. For example, carbon reduction. Okay, well, this is relatively new in households. I know that they asked, I have survey for employers, but now this is new. I mean, how do people travel, commute? The mode of transportation. That might help us out with performance measures for future. We don't know yet. I think this is, in my view, this is a good, these are good plans. Use the data for our performance measures. So I'm okay with it.
Great, thank you.
Would I like to see more projects? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we have to take a step back and say, okay, are we doing something wrong? Why are we missing the goal here?
Right.
So, I mean, I think this will do it. And it's not all of the funds, but it's a first step. Okay, just like anything else, when you build a road, you're not gonna go out there, cut and blow, you're gonna take a step back, plan it out. Okay, what are the needs? And then you start to design, and then you go to construction. This is almost similar to, okay, we have a problem, we have carbon, right?
If I can add to, because you touched on exactly what I was feeling in terms of safety. We have goals and performance measures. We don't use them for programming of projects. There's a disconnect. We can look at them on the various tools, but the response has been that regional council has not told us how we should use that for project selection and programming. So when we look at the RMAP, how does that inform our choices? If we're not using it to inform projects that maybe will reduce fatalities or reduce greenhouse gas, we're just collecting data for nothing. And I think it's great to create what our goals are so we can try to achieve them and what those performance measures are. But if we do not have direction from regional council on actually using that on future programming, I don't think that there's going to be much of a result.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Jose. Anyone online wanted to comment before we move on?
Yes, this is Heidi from the town of Marana. I just wanted to say that I would piggyback on what Jose had said. And sorry, I'm losing my voice, so
You're
you
okay.
probably can't hear me. But I'm okay, along with the town of Marana's position has been okay with the use of the CRP funds in this manner, as well as making a wholehearted effort at planning everything out and making sure that we do a good job at planning before we dive into everything else. So the town is good with the use of these funds.
Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else? Did see another hand just go up. Dan Gabao? There's Dan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mr. Chair. So this has all been very enlightening discussion over the past few TPC meetings. I just want to confirm that these projects have been identified and considered eligible by Federal Highways through ADOT's CRP process. However, it seems that there's a bit of concern about the programming process at large. So it's my suggestion that because of that, we consider that for a future agenda item. Whoever might want to suggest that so that we could talk about programming, CRP in specific, but programming, performance-based planning and programming as a separate topic. So that's my input.
Great, thank you, Dan. So I think you were breaking up just a little bit there, but what I heard you say is we consider a future agenda item to talk about how we program CRP funds, and there was a little bit after that too that it was kind of hard to hear. Did anybody else capture that? Is it programming in general?
Yeah, sorry, my connection's a little bit poor today. So just CRP programming and planning and performance-based planning and programming in general, I think would be a good discussion topic.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. And I would agree with that. We'll make sure we circle back under future agenda items to capture that.
Thank you.
All right, I see no other hands up and I see no one else in the room. So with that, we will move on to item 6. Thank you very much for the staff on that presentation. Item 6 is the regional pavement management update. This will be Lance Peterson. Lance, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here this morning just to provide an update on our regional pavement condition data and imagery contract. So at the end of April, ADOT provided us the samples that they will be collecting regionally. And with those samples, we shared that with our contractor, Roadway Asset Services. And so they could start pulling out just what segments that they will need to collect to supplement the data that ADOT will be providing. They're still working on determining the exact number of miles and samples that they'll have to collect, but they have moved forward with a schedule for work to begin. And they plan on starting the regional data collection and digital imagery next month in June. This collection will go on until August. And then at that point, they will start their QA QC process and processing, all the data. And the anticipated delivery date is October to our jurisdictions. That's basically our update at this point. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Great, thanks, Lance. I know this is an item we've been asking to have a discussion on, so I appreciate the update. It's good to hear that there's progress being made. I'll defer to my colleagues before I ask my questions. Jose?
Thanks. Thanks for the update. Yeah, we're looking forward to this information. Question on the data. They've been collecting data on our roads or regional arterials. Do they collect it every year or every 3 years? They collect every year. So rather than do the same thing to collect it every year? Well, our contract is to collect it every 3 years. Because that's what I was asking. So we're going to collect it every 3 years now. And ADOT does a limited sample size. So what our contract is going to do is supplement exactly, what ADOT's collecting, our contractor will supplement and collect the rest of the roadway. So like there may be a small portion of Grant Road that's being collected by ADOT. Our contractor will do the remaining Grant Road, both sides, because ADOT currently is only collecting one side of the roadway. So we don't collect it for IRI data anyway. Their data, they do have condition information in their data as well that we can pull out. So they collect, ADOT's going to continue doing that data collection annually. Exactly. They do what's required federally, I guess, for the pavement maintenance efforts. So you're going to duplicate theirs or just going to? I mean, they're going to collect data on certain roads. Are you going to continue doing that? We're going to collect condition on our major streets and routes across the region. So national highway roadways. And that data is going to begin to us in October. October is the anticipated delivery date from our contractor. If they can get it done sooner, I'm sure. Do they have a map of all the roads that they're going to be collecting data? That's what we're currently working on. They've pulled out what ADOT has collected, and so now we're looking at the regional map just to supplement. And you got those maps right from the city of Tucson when they were doing collecting data, right? We do have that ability to get the data from what the city was collecting. That's where we're anticipating that you're going to continue collecting that data on the same roads. Exactly. Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll be collecting basically what the city had been providing for all those years. When you get those maps, we're asking you provide that to us so that we're on the same page. Sure.
What was that request? Jose? Share the maps?
The maps that they're going to be collecting data for, like, for example, Ore Valley, they're going to collect, these are the arterial collectors that they're going to be collecting data on. I'd just like to see that map. So we're on the same page. Yeah, that's it. Everybody, is it okay if I share that with the task force, the regional pavement management task force?
That works. So,
Please do.
yeah, that's the expectation. Anything else, Jose?
I'll just have to.
Okay, all right. Lance, how much is this contract worth? I didn't see a copy of it in the packet.
I believe it's budgeted at 450,000.
Okay.
We don't know exactly what we're spending until we pull exactly. We're still determining the number of lane miles that we'll be collecting.
Okay. And so you said this is every 3 years. What happens? I understand there's like it's a state pass through, right? It's federal money that's passed through from the state for this effort. About that amount, 450,000 every year. So what happens in the off years that we're not collecting data? What happens to that funding?
That's a good question that I'll refer to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of the committee. So when this OWP was developed, we were still working with City of Tucson on the data collection, which was budgeted at 20,000. So working through this process, we changed our approach, and so now that we're maybe going to see some costs, and we'll work through the committee process or appropriate process as we develop next week, but make sure that we do this.
Okay, great. Just one thought, if there's an opportunity to collect more data outside just what's required, I think the region would be willing to have a conversation about what those priorities might look like if there's additional funding available. I assume you guys will talk about that at the working group, but if there's an opportunity for us to weigh in, we'd certainly be willing to have a conversation. Catherine?
I know early on in conversations about this, there was the concept that local agencies could piggyback on the contract with RAS if we wanted additional services. Was that worked into the contract that was executed that we can piggyback on it?
Yes, it's got piggyback language in the contract, and the contract is currently on our PAG website under the info center RFP RFQ section. But they have RAS has provided a kind of a table of costs that you can select from.
And then the data that we get when you do the network that Jose was talking about, will we get the raw data with the different distresses that we can input into our pavement management system, or are we going to get more of their already processed condition?
And my understanding is it'll be able to be provided in, I believe you guys are using Street Saver. And so that information, their data collection can be imported right into your Street Saver with all the distress information, pavement condition, IRI stuff.
Okay.
And then Cartograph is another. So they should be, our contractor will be able to provide it in which platform is being utilized by the jurisdictions. And some that may not have it may just request an overall condition table of the roadways, which can also be provided.
You guys don't use Cartograph?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this is only all around Morena.
We use Cartograph.
Okay, good. Yeah, we can do it. And it does have cooperative language, the contract.
Lance, since the requirement is every 3 years, you have a contract this year. Is it just for this year you have the contract with RAS, or is there a time component to that contract? Like, is it good for 5 years, 3 years? What's the?
Let's see. So every 3 years we're doing it, and I believe we have 2 1-year extensions after that. So a total of 5
with RAS.
Yeah.
So in between those 3-year collection periods, is there opportunity for jurisdictions to piggyback and collect additional data? Like, we don't have to wait for that 3-year period.
Definitely, it's available for use.
Okay, great.
I think you have to work through your procurement officer. And they should
have
get
a contract, yeah, sure.
I'll look for that cooperative language in the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to kind of get some clarity, Lance, on the actual network that will be collected. So you mentioned ADOT's going to do samples, and then the PAG work will fill in the rest of those samples and look at the network for additional samples. So I guess I'm trying to get a clear understanding of how this may differ from what has been collected previously, which was the full set of IRI data on the federal aid network. Are we going to see the full set of IRI data when you hand data to Jose, or is it going to be a sample of that full set of the federal aid network?
It will be the full set. Okay. So we're going to continue to provide basically the same information that the city of Tucson has provided for all these years.
Great.
But yeah, we just don't want to duplicate.
You don't
sampling
want
what
to
ADOT
collect the ADOT piece, so you have to figure that out, and then you'll do the rest of the federal aid network.
Exactly.
And then the add-on would be at local jurisdiction discretion for roadways in the lower criteria for local roadways and things of that nature, if we wanted to contract on the collection of that data.
Exactly. And they have an opportunity they provide software as a part of the piggyback. If somebody was interested in budgeting software, or, you know, if you wanted asset inventory information, they'll do that as well.
So just as a little matter of background, the program was not initially established simply to meet the federal requirement and be done. It was a long discussion many years ago with the city of Tucson and others to find out a way to invest these regional dollars to support the asset management responsibilities of jurisdictions. And so at that time, it was felt to be a good investment of the regional funds that could also be used on construction projects to collect that data, provide it to the jurisdictions. The jurisdictions said, we'll take it from here and we'll manage our assets and we'll figure out how to prioritize our pavement rehabilitation. So while it's not going to happen now, I would strongly encourage the use of those off-year dollars to be in the spirit of that support for the member agency jurisdictions, because that was the original intent of those funds, was to support the asset management responsibilities of the agencies. Our asset management responsibilities don't stop at the federal aid network. They go down all the way. And we've been willing and have shown that we're investing our own jurisdictional dollars to collect that data. But support from the regional pot of funding would be tremendously helpful in having us all have a consistent approach to how that data is collected, and then allowing for that variability to have, you know, a different PCI calculation for the city of Tucson and Pima County, for example, but also have, you know, a uniform, you know, universal PCI was one thing that we had talked about some years ago, so that when we're looking at pavement condition maps for planning and programming, we get to look beyond just IRI, which is the smoothness of ride. That tells you, okay, it's a rough roadway, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where there may be some underlying stresses on the roadway and it's in need of investment. So I think the PCI data and the more, you know, distinct data that's going to be collected can be used for that purpose. So I'm excited about the possibilities, and I would encourage that we keep this conversation going and look at the opportunity to invest those regional dollars to support the member agencies in their asset management responsibilities. And it aligns with the emphasis areas of the MPO.
You know, we're looking forward to, again, data from PEG.
Yeah.
Because this is necessary for our payment preservation program. We use this data, not the data that ADA collects, that IRI doesn't really mean much to us. I mean, we're looking down, like you said, stresses on the payment, and we need that so that we can plan our payment preservation program.
Precisely.
And especially at collectors and arterials, which is difficult for us to collect data from traffic. So we can collect the subdivisions because that's easy, but if it was collecting, we depended on city of Tucson when they bring the van. But now you guys stop doing that, so now we're really looking forward to the data because we're a little bit behind on that data. And we need that for our payment preservation program. So.
And the funding has never been limited, to my knowledge, to that collection down to the lower level. That would, of course, need to be confirmed, but I think there's potential use of those regional dollars to collect broad section of the network.
And you're right, it was a $450,000 annually.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some savings. So yeah.
All right. Good, James.
I mean, I wonder if I misspoke, so maybe it depends on David could help me, but if we do, that would go to a biennial cycle instead of an annual cycle. I don't really know what's going to happen with the project. So I'm not sure that it's being held in reserve. It's quite a speed. It's going to apply a commitment on an annual basis. Regardless of how it, I think that's just, we'll have to just revisit that and see what the needs are. And obviously, here there's some interest in using other ones.
Well, and this is, that it has always been in the tip as $450 a year. This year, it was determined we should take all the OWP elements out of the tip. So last viewing of the tip we saw, it was $450 for the next 5 years. And that would be my expectation. There would have to be a conversation before it's allocated elsewhere.
And checking with our folks, I believe it's on a reimbursement basis. I don't know if it's actually cash in hand, but it's eligible. The pavement management program was an eligible reimbursement. I think there's that added nuance as well. All right. I'm hearing no other comments. Lance, thank you very much for this update, and keep us posted on how we can work with you in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. We will move on to item 7, Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, RMAP update. Jeanette Duran.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have Hannah present this.
Great.
This one.
Take it away, Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello again, members of TPC. So for this agenda item, I'm just going to provide a brief update on the 2055 RMAP currently under development, specifically the RMAP working group updates and project list update. So 5 RMAP working group meetings have been held so far, the most recent of which was on April 8th. And we have one scheduled actually for next week on Tuesday, the 21st, at 1 p.m. in a virtual format. So the meeting invite and agenda will go out very soon, so be on the lookout for that. The discussion so far is focused on evaluating performance measures and providing guidance on the 2055 targets, particularly those related to safety, as well as discussing the input project list. So PAG staff has discussed possible recommendations to the project list and projects with committed funding, such as those linked to TIP projects, to help inform the ultimate 2055 RMAP project list. And we are working with working group members have provided feedback on these discussions, including funding amounts, as well as retaining, adding, and removing projects for possible inclusion in the RMAP. So we continue to work with and receive feedback from jurisdictional members to refine the project list. Once the RTA Next project list is adopted by the RTA board, that information will be incorporated into the RMAP project list. And we are using the most current RTA Next project list for the RMAP project list discussions. So the next step is to continue to align the project list with the fiscal constraint through working group discussions. The current fiscal constraint is estimated at approximately $16.4 billion, and a detailed financial plan update is anticipated for the working group meeting next week. The RMAP working group has also been briefed on the modeling work that the PAG data science team has been working on, and will receive an additional update at next week's working group meeting. As a reminder, all projects are in the RMAP Project Explorer, where jurisdictional partners can export project lists and view project details, including performance reports, and additional layers are also available, including justice for the information. And of course, details on the projects can be updated as needed, including any updated cost estimates or scope. Lastly, we anticipate releasing an RMAP survey next month, where respondents can provide feedback on transportation priorities and needs that will inform the RMAP. So we anticipate promoting the survey also in person at key locations in underserved and disadvantaged areas, to make sure that those folks are aware of the survey and have an opportunity to provide feedback. TPC members will be informed when the survey is live, and we encourage you to share widely. Appreciate any help to promote that survey. So this concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions. And then also Dr. Hunsu No, PAG's data science administrator, will be able to provide a brief update on the RMAP modeling under this agenda item. Thank you.
Do we want Hunsu to go first?
It's up to you.
Yeah, go ahead. You follow with the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning again, and members of the TPC. For the modeling side and for RMAP update, RMAP modeling, and so we've been working with and the jurisdictional partners for just the land use model and the input data collection, and there was just the PopTech and the subcommittee, and so reached out and they had an in-person meeting and discussed about just what required and what kind of things we can just review together, and including just the known projects and the general plan and the special plan, and those are actually just reviewed and the requests together. And right now, just we're hoping to just wrap up and most of the data collection for the land use model. and hoping to test out just the land use model. As well just we'd like to kind of test out just the activity-based model. So far also just another like a process and the input data collection for activity-based model and almost done. So hoping to just test it together. And meanwhile, also just redeveloped and tested and discussed with the PopTech, some committee in 2023 for just the land use model redevelopment and the module and together. The exercise and supposed to be used this time as an update and working together with the land use model and as well as just the activity-based model. So for on that process, it's required to just use for those two models and like just as a pair and one side land use model and the activity-based model and need to be integrated together. So we actually are going to just test that effort in this summer and hopefully discuss most of just draft output in this fall and that there's just a PopTech and the subcommittee on the OMIT working group and the if needed is just here is just the TPC. And plus just for like is the air quality modeling is actually the next step and but regarding and the J40 and the other performance measures we are also just updating in the together, so we hope to just discuss and those in the updated performance measures together in the sometime just later this fall. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have questions for the staff on those two presentations? Chadley?
What's the equity-based model that you're using?
Sorry?
You mentioned an equity model. What is that?
No, the performance measures. So we don't have just the equity and the model and but we have like a performance measures after getting all this just the output and we actually just have a post-processing tool and that actually analyze in the Title VI. That's one of the example and so far we've been using. We have a plan to just update and to incorporate the evaluation of J40 and especially for CJSD and J40 map. And so that's the kind of just next step we internally discussed and overall performance measures and but we haven't just tested yet. So we'd like to just test and share and with our just the PAC committees.
Okay, I do have some follow, and this is a question for the jurisdictions and for PAG. This is the first time I'm participating in the RMAP project selection process. And it seems to me that the decisions that are being made about the projects, that there isn't any sort of components or any sort of analysis that I can see that's being done about equity before we make the decisions about the projects that are being included, as well as the effect that those projects will have on greenhouse gas emissions. And there are tools now that we really should be using. There is one that the US DOT has put out called the Equitable Transportation Community Explorer tool. I don't know if anybody at PAG has used that or familiar with it, but I do know that that tool and information about that tool hasn't been brought to this committee, even though I've requested that kind of information be sent to this committee so that the jurisdictions can actually have these new tools that are being created to make informed decisions about the actual projects. Because once we have a project list and then we do an analysis, it feels a little late to me. So I guess I'm just curious if any of the jurisdictions are using any of these tools or how you're actually considering equity as well as greenhouse gas emissions in your project selection.
I think that's a really good question, but as mentioned earlier, and this in the IAJA also just a little bit kind of just the latest in the item we've been actually conducting and trying to just bring in our just the modeling side and as well as like just the PAC agents wide. So just I think a good place is discussing through just on that. And but so far we are not kind of just ready. And but that performance measure development and done, actually we can kind of share the outputs and how you can evaluate just the next round. But if just if there's a tool, I haven't just heard yet, and but I will just review and get back to you how we can kind of utilize that if it's doable.
Natalie, I'll say from the city's perspective, during Move Tucson, we did do an equity analysis. We now have an equity office that they are doing some analytics in terms of transportation equity. They actually assisted our department staff in developing our program for Proposition 411 in terms of how we program the 10-year pavement preservation program in using equity as one of the factors in where and how we program those dollars. So I'm not familiar with that tool specifically, but we do have some tools in the city of Tucson we've used to analyze equity and how we invest in our community.
Okay, thank you. Have any other jurisdictions done that kind of work as well?
We have not done that in Oro Valley. As a matter of fact, I was gonna ask you if you can elaborate equity. What do you mean by equity? Well, we haven't done that. That's what I'm asking. So if you can,
Find all this.
I have a definition of equity myself, but your definition of equity based on on your studies and the reports.
I mean, we are looking at single vehicle households, zero vehicle households, people who have experienced historic disinvestment, people who are experiencing poverty or low income, and then figuring out a way that we can take those elements, those data sets into account when we're talking about investments in the community.
Makes sense.
And there's
because we're kind of small, 36 square miles.
Yeah.
We're almost in the same band. So there's not much difference between North Oro Valley, South of Oro Valley. We're pretty much the same. It's uniform.
And I think to your point, Jose, it will affect the community differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Natalie's point is. Are we using these tools to figure out how a region-wide plan would take into account?
That makes sense regionally, but like for smaller communities like Oro Valley, we're not that big. So it's like asking South Tucson. Well, they're a little different than everybody else.
And I'll just follow up by saying that both the city and the county have adopted the Prosperity Initiative, and there is a specific transportation element within the Prosperity Initiative that we both committed to basically making equity a priority in our decision making with respect to transportation, as well as many other elements within the Prosperity Initiative. So that was adopted region-wide by both the city and the county. I think the other jurisdictions are in the process of considering adoption of it as well. So it is important that we make this kind of a mainstay in our conversations at this committee, as well as the greenhouse gases. I will say with respect to the greenhouse gases, the performance measure analysis and that Dustin's been working on, as he stated, is on hold right now because of lawsuits. And so what I don't want to see is that we don't move forward with any sort of performance measures or goal making with respect to greenhouse gas emissions reduction simply because of that. I think that we need to continue moving forward. Time is of the essence, and that we need to ensure that all the jurisdictions are considering how those projects can help in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our region. So I would like to see that be a bigger part of kind of our decision making in the RMAP process.
Okay, thank you. But just for clarification, and we have just the Title VI, and we are updating, and there's the evaluation through just the TIP process. And but this is for just the IIJA, mainly just to target it, and also just we'd like to just review and do in the income type for the detail, and based on just your kind of just a recommendation, if it's actually doable, how we can utilize that, and also just regarding just the air quality related, also we are actually reviewing, and most of just our work, but this is the mainly for just a regional level, and it's just evaluate each project. This is another kind of just a task we have to consider, but this is not the kind of just required in the force to do it. So I wonder maybe just we can discuss about and with actually Dustin together, then we can further develop or just consider the effort.
Great, thank you. Jose, did you have something else?
I was just going to ask, when does the RMAP need to be approved by the regional council? What's the
maybe Jeanette, maybe answer is a target.
Yeah, we're targeting spring of next year.
Right, next year.
Piggybacking on the performance metrics conversation, and this kind of gets to what you were talking about earlier, Jose. Have we looked at, are we meeting our performance metrics in the RMAP, and in terms of looking in the future, adjusting those performance metrics, and how can TPC be beneficial in that?
Yeah, those are, Mr. Chair, those are good discussions, and we've been having those at the working group committee. And so when the recommendations come out of that working group, our intent is to bring them back to this committee. So
Can you elaborate on the discussions?
Yeah, Hannah, did you want to?
Sure, thank you, Jeanette, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I'll just briefly elaborate. So as far as, meeting the performance metrics, some we are, some are not. Discussions at the last meeting particularly focused around the metrics for safety, because we are trending away from those in a lot of instances. So there was discussion on, maybe just not extending the target to, as it is now to 2055, but maybe being a little more ambitious. There's discussion of vision zero potentially. So we're having those types of conversations. The other one, other discussions, there is some comfort with, extending, the targets to 2055, which as they stand now, for those that we are meeting and are on track to meet. So I hope that answers your question. And I know Jeanette, if you had anything additional to add.
Covers it.
Thank you.
In addition to that, I don't think it's necessarily been settled, but back to the issue of how to use the targets and what's the purpose of the targets. I think that's kind of remains a little bit unreconciled. And part of that goes to figuring out how to pare down this gigantic list of projects into that constrained budget. And the approach has been, as described to us, well, the performance data is available for jurisdictions to consider, but really it's on jurisdictions to figure out how to jam that list down into something that you can live with in plan and whatever you can put into reserve.
Okay. I have a kind of a different question. So we're in the process of the RMAP update. Jeanette, you said that it looks like spring of next year, 2025, we'll be bringing this to regional council. In the meantime, how are jurisdictions able to amend the current RMAP for new projects? And I bring this up for a very specific reason, because the city is pursuing a BRT project, as you all know. And part of those federal requirements is that that project has to be in the long range plan. And I'm just concerned that we are now in a position where no jurisdiction can amend the RMAP and add any projects because we're in the thralls of this update. And I get it. There's work that has to go on to amend the RMAP, but is it really conceivable to think that we can't add any other projects until this RMAP update is complete? If there's a reasonable expectation that we could obtain federal funding for a project. In fact, I think there's other projects maybe that even may need to be added to the RMAP. So since we're on this topic, I'd just like a better understanding of what the amendment process is for the current.
So really quick, is this a new project itself? It's not in the RMAP at all?
I think there's a high capacity transit project in the reserve list of the RMAP, but it's not specific to the BRT project that the city's proposing. And so we had made a request to amend the current RMAP to include it. We demonstrated fiscal constraint. In fact, we reduced some of our other projects to demonstrate fiscal constraint, but we're not able to add the project to the RMAP until the update's complete. That's put us in a holding pattern. And I imagine it would put other communities in a holding pattern as well. So I just want to understand what the amendment process is.
We'd have to agendize that, have that discussion.
Why is that?
It's not on the agenda, so for open meeting.
RMAP update is this is part of the RMAP update conversation, in that if we're going through the update, how do you deal with requests in the current RMAP?
Mr. Chair, respectfully, we submitted that response to you already. And if that is a topic that you'd like to have on a future agenda item, you can recommend that in the next item, but it would have to be on the bulleted list of discussion topics to have at this meeting.
Okay, in the context of the 2055 RMAP update, how are you dealing with new project requests?
All of the jurisdictions were asked to submit their project list, which they've done. And as we build the project list, those are being reviewed, and the BRT project is in that proposed project list that's being discussed right now at the committee level.
And so all new requests have to be included in this RMAP update process.
Yes.
As it currently exists. Okay. Any other questions, Catherine?
What happens with the RTA next projects if they should change? I mean, that is going to affect the RMAP in a huge way, potentially. Are all of those projects already in the project list?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Skinner, yes, they are in the tentative project list right now. And that's kind of the part of the delay in getting this approved, because we're trying to make sure that that project list accurately reflects what's going to be recommended. But yeah, I mean, we could run into a situation right now. We're showing the continuation of the RTA in our fiscal constraints. So those projects are on the in-plan list, but should that situation change and those funds not be approved by the voters, then we're going to have to redo the whole project list. So we're kind of in this really unfortunate timing situation. But yeah, I mean, that's a very real possibility.
Mr. Chair, I think it's, very important that we keep in mind the purpose of the RMAP, which is intended to facilitate the pursuit for project funding for projects listed in the long range plan, and any actions that prohibit that opportunity for jurisdictions should be carefully considered, because it's always been the intent to facilitate the needs of the jurisdictions when they're attempting to pursue funding. I know that there are other projects that may not be on the same timeline as your BRT project, but there's projects that affect both Pima County and Sahuarita that are going to have to get on the long range plan list. I'm not entirely clear whether we can wait until spring or fall of next year, or whether that's going to require an amendment process. But it is imperative that the amendment process not be something that prohibits our pursuit of earmark or other federal funding or funding opportunities that are out there just because the project is not on the long range plan list, especially when there's a net zero opportunity to add a project and shave off another project that you are sponsoring.
Thanks, Paul. My final question is, what is the requirement of the region to update RMAP? Is it, what's the requirement? Like every so many years it has to be updated, right? 4 years. We're on that right now.
We're a little behind. We're a few months behind, but we've been working closely with FHWA to kind of monitor what's going on with our RTA Next process. We don't want to get in a bind like Ms. Skinner was just speaking to. And so.
Other questions on RMAP before we move off?
Real quick, couple things, and we don't need to resolve them here, but I'm curious, and we can hear more about this later, what your plans, what you're expecting to get out of the survey and what you're intending to do with it. I guess I was hoping to see a little bit more early survey work so that we could shape the projects and the targets and the RMAP, and then that would kind of lead into what projects are in and what projects are out, and what the targets look like and whatnot. But I think that opportunity has passed us. So I'm real curious, and we can hear this at the working group, what the intention of the survey is and how you're planning to use that input from the public. And then in addition to that, I'll also be curious to understand a little bit more of the specifics with the financial plan, because the fiscal constraint for the RMAP currently that was adopted in 2020 is $15.1 billion. And the new fiscal constraint with an additional 5 years of horizon is only $16.4 billion. So that's like an increase less than 10%, yet you have an additional 5 years of collection of revenues. It just doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So I'll be curious to see how those details are laid out for the working group and for TPC. And again, the intention of the RMAP, from my understanding, has been within reason, set that reasonably anticipated revenue ceiling as high as you possibly can, so that you can have as much opportunity for identifying projects within that, fiscal constraint. Don't compress that down because you're not exactly sure whether or not revenues will be there. Have it be reasonable, but push it to its upper limit if you can, and it makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Paul, anyone else? All right, thank you, Hannah and Hunsu, for your presentation. And with that, we will move on to item 8, update on the Regional Transportation Alternatives Grant, RTAG competitive selection, Jamie Brown and/or David Zinda, and they're both at the table. So,
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is a item that was tabled from the last meeting. Appreciate your patience with this. We all need the presentation here. David, please do chime in. Thank you for your help in the process. David. We're putting together the call for projects, which was issued September 6th of last year. As some of you may know, the Transportation Alternatives Program is set aside a federal surface transportation block grant program and encompasses a variety of smaller scale transportation projects, such as pedestrian and bicycle facilities, as well as others. The projects were required to meet eligibility criteria for both the federal TA program and the Regional Transportation Authority category number 41, which is freeways, pathways, by paving sidewalks. Projects were also required to be located along a major collector or grader or along an established bicycle boulevard. Only the required non-federal match, which is 5.7% of the project total, is offered to be covered by the LTA. Federal funding is available by geographic area, in which PAG has the following three. You've heard us talking about these population names or regions through the TIP development process, and it also applies here. So we've got the greater than 200,000 in population, 5,000 to 49,999 in population, and other areas of the state with a population of less than 5,000. Through the RTAG call for projects, federal funding was made a combination program set aside in the greater than 200,000 population region, as well as surface transportation block grant from the 549K and less than 9. So all three of those sources are eligible for transportation projects, which is why we group them within the umbrella RTAG. For federal requirements for the Transportation Alternatives Program, a competitive selection process must be used. PAG convened a panel of Transportation Planning Committee member agency representatives or their designees that did not submit any projects for this competitive grant. The three-member panel reviewed applications, listed project presentations, scored projects, and voted on the awarding of funding for projects. Given the federal requirement for a competitive selection process to be used for the TA program, the decision of the selection panel is final. And on your screen, you see the projects that were awarded funding. Project for the City of Tucson, 202nd Street bike pedestrian improvements, Pima County's South Hotland Road multi-use path, and the town of Sahuarita, two projects that are connected, the El Toro Road multi-use path and the Bonita Road multi-use path. They have since decided to administer those projects as one project, excuse me. They also inquired with ADOT on the use of PERF exchange. The PERF exchange program allows the exchange of PERF to a 90% to 100% ratio. So they have agreed to accept a lower amount of funding than 90% of PERF in coordination with ADOT. We are eligible for funding, and it was mentioned in the public projects that it's actually multiple jurisdictions.
Amy, can you pick up the mic?
Oh. I can repeat it there. Sorry about that. If they can thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
I think thank you. This one's working better. That's the problem. Thank you, David.
Any questions for Jamie and RTAG?
I'm just curious if there's a map that shows where these various projects are, because it doesn't have the limits for some of them.
We did not prepare a separate map with, but we actually have the maps in the applications. So we could follow up and provide the maps that were included in the applications.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Any other questions?
One quick question.
Go ahead, Jose.
Hey, it's PERF exchange, is that back?
Yes,
It is back, okay. Good.
it's back. It was on hold for a while.
Make yours back.
Yes,
I'm glad I see that's back.
it's back. Thank you.
Else? Congratulations to everyone that was awarded RTAG, and this was not an action item, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, information only. Thank you.
All right. We will move on to item 9, future agenda items. I can hear a few we discussed during today's rather long meeting. So the first was, I think Dan had mentioned future items to discuss programming CRP funds as well as performance-based planning and programming. Not sure if those were 2 items or 1 item, but those were discussed and brought up by Dan, and I agree those should be agendized. I'd like to agendize a conversation and discussion about how an amendment to the current RMAP can be done. as we wait for the RMAP update to occur. And any others that I missed?
Mr.
Natalie,
Chair,
go ahead.
Again, kind of repeating myself, but I have had this suggestion several times. I'm just going to keep suggesting it until it's approved. But I would like to have this committee actually collectively discuss how we are going about analyzing greenhouse gas emissions in our specifically in our project selection and how we can actually do that and make sure that everybody has the information that they need to understand all the different complex components of that, as well as equity. So I think those could be two different items, or they actually could be together because they're directly related. So and I would like to offer any additional information that folks need in order to be able to do that within their jurisdictions. And I'd like to be able to offer that kind of information.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. And so as a reminder, last time we talked about the future agenda items will be listed in the meeting summary. I have been notified by the executive director that the chair of TPC does not actually set the agenda. It's set by the executive director and PAG staff. So we'll definitely take those future agenda items under consideration, and hopefully we'll see them on a future agenda. Any other future agenda items?
Mr. Chair, that seems to conflict with my understanding of the bylaws. Do we need to take a closer look at what the bylaws are saying on this?
Certainly agendize it if that's what you're suggesting.
I think that would be a good idea.
All right, a review of the TPC bylaws will also be added as a future agenda item. Any others? All right, thank you all for your time and patience today. We stand adjourned.